Today we will be discussing the Revolutionary War. Before the war began, there were tensions in the colonies. Britain implemented the Stamp Act of 1765. It was a direct tax on most printed materials and made it a requirement that most paper be printed on a stamped paper made in London. Britain followed this up by implementing the Townshend Acts. This created a tax on all glass, lead, paints, paper, and tea imported into the colonies. Britain hoped the acts would lessen its expenses in the colonies, but many Americans viewed the taxation as an abuse of power, and they wanted the same rights as other British subjects. The colonials resisted these acts, and that led to some violence. In 1770, British soldiers opened fire on a mob and killed 5 men in what would be known as the Boston Massacre. To get revenge for this act, some colonials dressed up as Mohawk Indians boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. This led to Britain creating the Intolerable Acts, which were made to punish the colonials for the Boston Tea Party. In response to this, colonial leaders met in Philadelphia in 1774 to discuss their problems with the British Crown. This group was led by George Washington of Virginia, John and Samuel Adams of Massachusetts, Patrick Henry of Virginia, and John Jay of New York. It was against being taxed without proper representation and was not for housing the British Army without their consent. The First Continental Congress agreed to meet in a year. The Second Continental Congress finally convened in Philadelphia in 1775. They were joined by newcomers Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. In this meeting, they all voted to create a Continental Army who would then be led by George Washington. June 17th marked the war's first battle. It was the Battle of Bunker Hill. The colonials were able to inflict a large amount of British casualties, but it still ended in a British victory. The colonials showed here that they would be a force to be reckoned with though. Throughout that fall and winter of 1775, Washington's forces struggled to keep the British contained in Boston, but weapons captured at Fort Ticonderoga in New York helped shift the balance of that struggle in late winter. The British evacuated the city in March 1776, with Britain's General William Howe and his men retreating to Canada to prepare a major invasion of New York. On July 4, 1776, America finally declared their independence by drafting the Declaration of Independence. It was written by 5 men, but Thomas Jefferson was the main writer. It was signed by all members of the Continental Congress and therefore was made official. During this same month, Britain sent a fleet of 34,000 troops to crush the rebellion. Britain's main focus when the war began was to separate New England, which was where the war was most popular. General John Burgoyne led British soldiers from Canada and planned to meet General Howe at the Hudson River. On the army's way down there, though, the Britons dealt a huge loss to the Americans and recaptured Fort Ticonderoga. General Howe decided to move his army south near Chesapeake Bay and proceeded to attack the Americans at Brandywine Creek, Pennsylvania. Howe's move had left Burgoyne's army exposed near Saratoga, New York, and the British suffered the consequences of this on September 19th. An American force under General Horatio Gates defeated them at Freeman's Farm, and this is known as the First Battle of Saratoga. After suffering another defeat on October 7th at the same place, which is considered the Second Battle of Saratoga, Burgoyne surrendered his remaining forces on October 17th. The American victory at Saratoga would prove to be a turning point of the American Revolution. France, who had been secretly helping the Americans since 1776, decided to enter the war openly on the American side, though it would not formally declare war on Great Britain until June 1778. During the winter of 1777, the French sent a military officer named Frederick von Steuben and an aristocrat named Marquis de Lafayette to train and help lead the colonials. On June 28, 1778, as British forces under Sir Henry Clinton, who had replaced Howe as supreme commander, attempted to withdraw from Philadelphia to New York. Washington's army attacked them near Monmouth, New Jersey. The battle effectively ended in a draw, as the Americans held their ground, but Clinton was able to get his army and supplies safely to New York. On July 8th, a French fleet commanded by the Comte d'Estaing arrived off the Atlantic coast, ready to do battle with the British. A joint attack on the British at Newport, Rhode Island, in late July failed, and for the most part, the war settled into a stalemate phase in the north. The Americans experienced some setbacks in the South during this time period. General Benedict Arnold abandoned America and fled to Britain. The British occupied Georgia by early 1779 and captured Charleston, South Carolina in May 1780. Nathanael Greene became America's commander in the South in December 1780 and proceeded to lead General Daniel Morgan and his troops to a victory over Britain in Cowpens, South Carolina in January of 1781. In the fall of 1781, Greene's American forces had managed to force Britain to withdraw to Virginia's Yorktown Peninsula, near where the York River empties into Chesapeake Bay. Supported by a French army, 14,000 troops, and 36 French warships, George Washington and his army cornered General Charles Cornwallis and forced them to surrender his entire army in Yorktown on October 19, 1781. Though there were troops still in America for 2 years after that battle effectively ended the war. Britain finally removed their troops in 1783. Britain and America signed the Treaty of Paris, and Britain formally recognized the United States as an independent nation. America fought hard and long, and finally won their right for independence.